and those in attendance. We'll start with the council members who are in attendance, and Ms. Sims, do you want to call it out? Okay.
Sure. Eddie Taylor.
Here.
Levine Ross. Here. Dr. Kenneth Chalker. Doesn't appear to be here. Habiba Grimes. Here. Glenn Shoemade. Not here yet. Dr. Gullett. Here. Yanela Sims. Here. And virtually, see the virtual, Ricky?
Can they hear you?
They can hear you.
They can hear me.
Okay.
We can hear you. Can you hear us?
We can, and I will, I just can't see you guys. Randell McShepard. Okay. India.
I'm here. I'm here.
Thank you, Randy. India Pierce Lee.
Present.
Marsha Maccabee.
Here.
Sheila Wright. Janice Contreras.
Here, and Sheila Wright is on here. She's just muted, but she's on here.
Oh, thank you, Janice. And Victor Ruiz. Okay. And
Glenn Shoemade is virtual too.
Right. For the record, I'm also here.
oh, thank you, Glenn. I for some reason I had you coming in person.
And I was until today's, life happens.
Okay, no worries. Thank you.
That's an unexcused absence, though.
We did hear from Annette Blackwell as well as Stephen Cavanis, and they both are excused today. So it appears we have a quorum.
We have a
Chair
quorum.
Taylor.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining. We have a guest who will join us a little bit later, I understand. So that'll represent the bulk of our conversation. And as usual, we will hear from the county executive on a series of topics, conversation, and then it's open to what the body believes they'd like to talk about that's not necessarily on the agenda. So we will get started.
Okay, I'll get started with the moment of silence and reflection. As I've said previously, by definition, reflection is a private practice. But as we have done previously, sometimes there's value in a collective reflection. This, I believe, is one of those times. Like many of you, I'm a parent, and as parents, we provide guidance to our children in the hopes they will be respectful, purposeful contributors to their community and the larger society. As parents, we hope by our words and actions, we demonstrate the highest ethical models that counter the stereotypes and the negative influences and behaviors our children may encounter. And if there is a transgression, we teach our children to own it by accepting responsibility and to apologize and account for the transgression. We've all seen, read, or heard about the slap and the language displayed at the Oscar Awards ceremony. The decision to resort to a violent act was ultimately a disastrous decision, and it ironically occurred during the time the award to Questlove for Summer of Soul was recognized. The 1969 Summer of Soul was a documentary tribute to the nonviolent gathering of thousands of African Americans during the Harlem Cultural Festival held in Mount Morris Park in Harlem, New York. It was Harlem's Woodstock and a celebration of the healing power of music and the peace, joy, respect, and brotherhood among all. Jokes may be nasty, they may be offensive, and perhaps even painful, and it may be gallant to protect your family. But in my reflection, I find no rationale for violence. I do not believe we can overlook the impact of what occurred despite the reasons presented. No discussion, no understanding, and no commentary can diminish the significance of what occurred. Too many people during this tumultuous time in this county believe that Black men are quick to rage and physical violence. Violence may not be equated with race, however, we cannot afford to reinforce a stereotypic belief. My husband and I thought it again necessary to unpack what happened with our sons and again have the talk. The bottom line of my private yet collective reflection is that physical violence cannot be justified, praised, or tolerated. It is not a mirror for masculinity. Instead, it is reprehensible and inexcusable. So my private reflection is public, it is collective, and I hope each member of the Citizens Advisory Council on Equity will also reflect and pray for healing, equity, and peaceful resolution of our differences. Let's take a moment. Okay, thank you.
But we don't talk about these in advance. That's an interesting one on a
Bet
number
you
of.
saw something else
I
coming.
thought so.
Uh-huh.
Going a different direction. Any thoughts or comments on the reflection? Okay, all right. Very good. Any public comments?
Since our last meeting, we have not received any public comments submitted via email to equity@cuyahogacounty.us. And today's in-person meeting is also open to public comment. Have we received any? I'm getting an indication that we have not received any.
Okay. Can we get a viewing of the folks in attendance on one of these screens?
I'm working on that.
Oh, okay, all right, good, thank you, appreciate it. Well, the next step, of course, is word from our county executive. Budish.
So, hello, everybody, and welcome again. Over the last, I don't know, maybe at least a year, we've been working to figure out the ARPA law and what we should be doing with our funds that we've been awarded. The first step, of course, was to figure out what we were allowed to do. We were getting, in two tranches, $240 million, which is good and well appreciated. Not as much as the city of Cleveland, but still pretty good. So we've been soliciting suggestions, proposals, comments from the entire community. We've gotten, 500 or 600 suggestions on our website. We opened up a website for people to submit them. We publicly announced it multiple times. We've had meetings with groups, we've had meetings with organizations, we've had meetings with community leaders, and we've gotten many recommendations. As I said, we are receiving $240 million. I would guess that the requests we've gotten total at least 10 times that. So there's a lot of good proposals and suggestions that will not be funded by the ARPA dollars, just because although $240 million is a lot, it's not enough to cover all the important things that people have suggested, and I would say the bulk of the suggestions are good ones. So we've been trying our best to figure out the best way to spend the money with two goals. One is to make sure we rise out of the pandemic, which is still ongoing. I'm sure Dr. Gullett will tell us that it's still happening. And the second piece is to set ourselves up for many years to come with a positive result. So those are the two general categories we've been looking at. We've worked closely and collaboratively with County Council, which has to approve any initiatives that we decide to do as a group. We've worked very well together. County Council has been very supportive and helpful. Over the last month, we have announced via they're not little videos that we put on the website and sent out to the media. We've proposed about 35 initiatives so far, and I think that they are really, really strong and positive. I'd just like to tell you about several of them that certainly impact or impacted by equity views. So we announced that we are contributing, we're proposing to contribute. Everything's a proposal until it's approved by council. We're proposing to contribute $5 million to the food bank. Food scarcity is still a big issue. Hunger is a big issue in Cuyahoga County. The food bank has been a tremendous partner and resource. They are in the midst of building a new building, which will allow them to be more efficient and take in more food, that they can store more food, and distribute more food. So we're proposing to contribute $5 million of ARPA funds to that project. The issue of lead in homes is still a major problem in Northeast Ohio. We have been contributing $800,000 a year. We've committed to do that for 5 years to the Board of Health to mitigate lead paint in homes. And through our ARPA dollars, we're contributing another $1.8 million to supplement that.
Per year or in total?
No, this is, ARPA is only one-time money.
Yeah, I didn't know if you could stretch it out, but you have to deploy it when you
Right.
deploy it. Got it.
We have still a lot of small businesses that are suffering, that were hit hard by the pandemic, by the closures, by the fact that, I've seen, unfortunately, a lot of small businesses that actually have had to cut back on their hours or close because of difficulty of hiring employees. So we have been working hard to support our small businesses in the community with a focus on minority-owned businesses. We've previously contributed $7 million, and we're going to add another $2 million of ARPA funds to that effort. Affordable housing is very important in the county. We have to increase the availability of affordable housing. So we're going to be proposing to allocate $3 million to incentivize developers to increase the affordable housing that they build. This will be gap financing for them. And we anticipate it'll create a good number of additional affordable housing units. We, as a county, are responsible for the safety of kids. There's a number of reasons why kids may end up with us. They may not be able to be cared for at home. The parents may not be around. They may be uncontrollable. A variety of different reasons. And what happens, they may commit minor offenses or major offenses. Typically, what happens is that the police get involved. They drop kids either at the juvenile detention center, the courts, or our office at the Children and Family Services office building at Jane and the Hunter. If they're taken over to the juvenile court and detention center, if they have committed a very serious offense, like a murder, they will be booked in there and treated kept at the juvenile detention center. However, the juvenile detention, it seems that things have gotten really bad in the community with young people these days, worse than ever. And so the juvenile detention center basically is filled with murderers and rapists. And if a person, youngster, commits a minor offense, first of all, it's not good to put them in with rapists and murderers. And second, the juvenile detention center doesn't have room for them. So they'll be turned away and probably put on the street, back out on the street. Or they can be dropped at our office building. And when that happens, we take responsibility. We try to get them placed on emergency placement as quickly as possible. And in most cases, we can place them within a few hours. But there are some kids that are real problems and that places won't take them. There's a tremendous shortage of emergency placement options in the community. For example, we have contracted with one place where we're paying $1,000 a day for the right to have a room for one placement. I mean, it's really hard out there. So emergency placements are tough. We are allocating $1 million to increase our ability to do more emergency placements, but that's not the entire answer by far. We have had multiple meetings with all the residential options out in the community, all the treatment options in the community. We've had them all here in this building several times, and been working with them to try to come up with better solutions. We've proposed with the ARPA fund a major change, which will be a youth diversion program. We have, as many of you know, we've created a diversion center to divert people out of the criminal justice system, people who have mental health and addiction problems, and shouldn't be in the jails, should be in the community. That's where the best place they can get treatment. However, that's only for adults. So we're proposing to create a youth diversion center, which will have two parts. One is it'll be a place that police or others can drop kids for an emergency so that they're not dropped in an office building. And if we can't, with the office building, get emergency placement, they end up staying there for a day or two or three. Kids should not be sleeping in an office building. But that's where they are right now. The youth diversion program should be able to help with that. And the other thing is it'll be a youth diversion program. The second part will be a longer-term treatment program, a little bit like our regular diversion program for adults, where they could stay for maybe 10 days, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and get treatment, and then potentially get referred to a longer-term community placement. We're proposing $5 million for the youth diversion program on top of the $1 million for the youth emergency placement. Addictions are still rampant in the community, and we have fortunately received significant funds from our opioid settlement, and we're spending that on a variety of treatment programs. But I will say that there's one program in the community that will take women with children, and that's the Hitchcock Center for Women. And they are proposing an expansion of their program, and we're proposing to contribute $1 million to that expansion. Vacant and abandoned property demolition. We have spent as a county $50 million already, and we've helped communities take down blighted properties all through the county, and we're proposing to spend another $2 million out of the ARPA funds for that. We have a number of vacant lots in the community. You all go through communities, you see, house, vacant lot, where, there's been potentially a house that's been taken down there. And those can be real scars on the neighborhood. And Randell is on the call. We've worked with Randell and a woman named Sarah Continenza from Food Strong and Ridall, and they have offered to lead our effort to hopefully do something with those vacant properties. We've talked about pocket parks, gardens, and other more productive uses that will also improve the neighborhood, and we're devoting $400,000 to that project. We still have a lot of people who are threatened with eviction, either because they don't have a job, lost their job, or whatever. Evictions are something that can destroy a community. We have already spent $25 million of mostly CARES money on eviction protection. Most of that goes to help pay the rent. Some of that has gone to help renters with legal assistance to fight eviction. We have another $25 million that will be, that we've already allocated to be spent. And we got another $50 million on top of that. So we're gonna be devoting $100 million to rental assistance in Cuyahoga County. That is a huge investment in the people of this county.
Much of that through the ARPA? Not all 100, right?
No, actually, none of it's ARPA, but it's related. It's part of the emergency rental assistance
Got it.
funds, which also are part of the federal packages that are coming out.
What was the total amount?
Total will be $100 million. College subsidies. We have, in Cuyahoga County, we've had for a number of years, Councilwoman Sunny Simon's been a major advocate for scholarships for kids. And we've been putting in $500,000 a year. We'll be adding another, I believe it's 500,000 to that to double the number of scholarship available. We have identified as a problem that oftentimes people will go to college, maybe they'll go a year or 2 years and then have to leave for some reason or choose to leave for some reason. They will have debt that may come from books or fees, college fees or whatever that they owe the school. Well, if they decide to go back to school, which apparently has become a real problem, if they want to go back to school, they need to get their transcript. They're not allowed to get their transcript if they owe money to the school. And that has stopped many, many kids from going back to school. So we are putting in, we can't let an unpaid bill stop somebody from going to college, so we're gonna put ARPA funds into that to pay off the debts. And then we're also, we've created another program which builds on top of our scholarships that I mentioned. We want to make it so that any kid, any person who wants to go to college can go to college. And there's already in place a number of programs, both federal, state, and county, that help with that. We're not going to duplicate any of that, but we want to build onto that. So the best program, one of the best is the Pell Grants that are out there for lower income people. And if you want to go to a 2-year college like Tri-C, basically the Pell Grant can pay all or most of the costs for the first 2 years. But that doesn't get you your bachelor's or whatever degree after that. So what we're going to do is a completion scholarship, which will pay a scholarship for the last 2 years as well. That's our proposal. So we'll be putting for these various programs for the colleges about $2.5 million. And I can go on, but I mean, the bottom line is we've got like 35 programs that we've already announced. If you want to get more information, find out what we're proposing, it's on the website, on our county website. They'll be presented one by one to county council. They'll go to committee, they'll be debated and dealt with in county council. And I'm real excited about these programs. I think these are very impactful. I haven't even talked about some of them that are more long-term, that are economic development related, because they're not as much equity-oriented, but virtually everything we do is somehow impacts equity. So our workforce program, which we're putting $9 million into, we're going to build a pipeline for workforce. And we're building on what's already available. We're already putting people through training programs and through our manufacturing program, for example. I think there was 50 or 75 returning citizens that have already been brought into manufacturing jobs through our workforce program, and we're looking at scaling those way up. We've got a program to attract businesses by using our water, by using a microgrid. So, I mean, there's a number of things going on that we're proposing that I think are extremely exciting. I just wanted to give you a flavor of what we're doing because it certainly is right along the lines of what you all have been working on here.
Okay, so a series of things to unpack there. Before we go into any items maybe not covered by the county executive, I would like folks to respond to any of the topics he did bring up, from the food bank to the lead issues to the small business support. Affordable housing was one of those, the gap financing portion of this, the emergency placements, the diversion program center that you described, addiction issues. We have the vacant and abandoned housing issues that you mentioned, so the protection related to that, not necessarily related to ARPA, but certainly on the agenda. And then we'll have to hear more about the completion, the college completion, the Pell Grants, sort of what the mechanism is for. Maybe you don't have an answer, so I don't want to be unfair. These things are anytime process-oriented, but who will help manage the deployment of these funds around corollary components to Pell Grants, this additional assistance, so kids who want to graduate, should graduate, can graduate. So on those topics alone, right, since those are mostly ARPA related, given what the county executive just described, any thoughts or comments before we move into perhaps the next phase of this discussion? Sims.
So I had two questions. My first one was around the support for small business. Are there any stipulations or guidelines that will go along with that support? Like, for instance, paying a livable wage, providing any type of benefits for employees who small businesses choose to bring onto their teams. And then my second question was about the demolition and rebuilding of vacant properties. So you can, if you want to answer the first one first.
Vacant and abandoned properties. They're torn down, and what's the reconstruction look like? Perhaps through the.
Because I'm wondering if there's some consideration being given to these lots and putting affordable housing in those lots that are vacant, or in any of the lots where older homes are going to be demolished. I didn't know, what the thought process was.
How do you pair the $3 million in affordable housing, this incentive, how you incentivize these builders, developers that you talked about?
To build in those areas.
Right.
So I'm trying to remember what the first.
So the first question was, is there any incentive for small business when they go through their hiring process to ensure that, those jobs that they're opening up or making available for the community are sustainable jobs with a livable wage or, benefits of some sort? Or is it just, the business is getting support, but then they can hire whomever at whatever rates they feel like hiring them at?
Well, first of all, let me explain. When at some point long ago, the county actually administered the small business programs. We stopped doing that because we're not good at deciding where the money should go or not go. We made a lot of loans, for example, that went bad. This was, before I came in. So we decided we'd work with others that are better at it. So we have partnered with a number of organizations like the Urban League has a program, right, Marcia? And we partner with ECDI and other organizations that do this. So we don't make the decisions as to who gets the loans or grants. We partner with others to do that. On the demolition, we don't decide where that is either. We partner with communities or mostly communities. Occasionally, I think there's a CDC or something like that that identifies a property that needs to be taken down because it's causing terrible impact on the community. When I've gone around to some of these, I remember speaking to a woman that showed me, I live over here, and I can't sell my house. And I said, why can't you sell your house? She said, because on this side, there's a property, it's all boarded up, and it's being used as a drug house. And on this side, there's a vacant house that's abandoned. That's, if you look at it, you look in the back, it's a garbage dump. So there's no way I can sell my house at this point. So, you know, it's that kind of situation that we've been looking at. But we don't identify which ones. We leave that to the experts in the communities to make those decisions as to which to tear down, which not. In terms of what to do with vacant parcels, we have never, that's up to the communities. With affordable housing, we don't dictate the affordable house. We could never afford to build new affordable housing ourselves. So we're doing the gap financing. There are plenty of organizations and developers that want our money. And by using ours as gap financing, we can tell them, okay, we'll give you a loan or a grant, but we want you to commit as part of that to do, 50 units of affordable housing or whatever it might be. So we don't tell them where to go. We don't dictate a whole lot of things about what they're doing, because we can't. I mean, it's not our property, but we can put stipulations on, as you were talking about, which we're doing with the affordable housing.
In furtherance of that question, look, we make assumptions around who benefits this whole equity lens when it comes to affordable housing, but there are developers in the mix. So if you're going to commit, and I'd rather these not just be words that are said, right, that we think about how to create some sort of change. We're going to commit $3 million in gap financing. Some of those developers should be minority and women developers in this process, and the notion around hard to find or difficult to find, and maybe we take it a step further. Maybe we if there aren't enough to do this work, there are partnerships that can be created. So there are folks who are learning the development business, whether it's affordable or not, but learning that business. So to the point, certainly the livable wage is important. Certainly who we use as a developer is important. But the thought that goes into partners we create in this process is just as important in my view.
Yeah, I mean, I think, sometimes in a lot of cases, the county sleeps on the ability that you have to influence some of the decision making, particularly when the county is providing funds towards such developments. I recognize that you're not the sole decision maker, but if an organization or business or entity wants these dollars and the county is making a commitment to utilize those dollars in a particular way or in certain spaces, I think it is, well within the county's scope to put very specific stipulations on how those dollars are used, especially when we're talking about, equity. I for the life of me, I can't understand why there needs to be a big discussion around, like, we have to tear down old properties and we've got these vacant lots. So why can't you just build new homes in those spaces? It's going to be beneficial for everybody. Same with small business. I just, from where I stand, it appears as though there's not enough, influence being utilized. I think the county has a little bit more influence in what they're actually using. And that's why I asked the question, because I want to be clear on where you feel the county's role is. You're putting money into these projects, and I just, believe that there should be a little bit more influence. If we really want to be equitable and we're really talking about, like, having an impact in these spaces, I think the ability to influence a little bit more should be utilized. So.
Well, I understand what you're saying. And we've talked about this in other contexts, you and I and others. And, you know, the county has some ability to influence, perhaps not as much as you might suspect. And I think if you look at our track record on small business, for example, I think the record is something like 50% of the businesses that we've contributed to are minority-owned and 60 or 70% are female-owned. So I think the track record on that has been excellent. So, you know, I understand what you're saying, and, you know, but sometimes it comes down to, you know, if we put too many restrictions on, we don't get the project, and it doesn't get done at all. So, you know, that's the trade-off, the balancing, that we try to come up with a good balance for our, you know, to achieve our goals, but we don't want to drive the business out.
Okay, I think someone had a question.
Okay, there are a few hands raised. Marshall, we'll start with you.
Okay, thank you, Chair Taylor. To the executive, I actually have two. The first question is, aren't there compliance goals that are associated with contracts that are given?
Yes,
County executive?
absolutely.
Okay, what, okay, I would have thought so. And certainly, it talks about the percentage of minorities who can work on the job,
Correct.
et cetera, right? I mean, to Yanella's question. So I just want to make sure that was out there.
And when you're, I mean, I don't know if you know off the top of your head, but when the Urban League is helping us with small businesses,
Right.
I assume you're looking at those things.
Well, we're looking at the living wage jobs, because we're helping to create jobs.
Correct.
So we're not actually in the business of contracting developers
No,
to do
I'm not
projects,
talking-
but
Right.
yeah.
Right, I was
Right.
talking about the small business piece.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Those jobs have to be living wage. But my first question when I first raised my hand was, isn't the actual council meeting on the 18th at 3:00 when these ARPA recommendations are being presented?
No, some may be, and Brian, if you know anything, what's happening is we have announced publicly our intentions as to our proposals. A number of them are still being finalized in terms of RFPs going out, contracts being negotiated, et cetera. So as all those details come together, then we'll present them to council. So they'll be coming to council over the next several months, actually.
Okay, I think the workforce one is on the 18th.
Yeah, that may be. The workforce one may be one of the early ones, because that's pretty far along.
Okay, thank you.
And then the compliance goals can be found on the website?
There are compliance goals on the websites.
Yeah, my point pushes it a bit further than compliance, because those goals are clear. I'm also talking about creating developers, right? How do we create those small businesses that can do development, affordable housing, and other developments? And if that's on the website, then compliance.
I don't know what you mean by creating developers.
Well, you're going to go to a series of developers who may or may not be minority-owned developers, right? If there are a series of minority-owned developers who can do this work, almost by default. I'm talking about the $3 million in affordable housing, the incentive.
The affordable housing.
Yeah, I said something else, but the affordable housing, right? The incentive.
Well, that isn't, we're not creating developers, and we're not, what we're doing, and we have lots of developers that come to us with requests for funds.
Mm-hmm.
And typically they, we talk to them about affordable housing, for example, when it's a housing project, when it's a apartment building or something.
So I guess the clarification is, when you say you have lots that come to you, hopefully in that description of lots, there are enough that are minority-owned, right? You're not creating developers, I get that. You're not starting these businesses for folks. But there are enough that are minority-owned so that those companies will also avail themselves of these incentive dollars. And thus, that also helps the community. because they
That
happen
would
to
help
be, yes, because they happen to be minority-owned developers who are also taking advantage.
And Lenora can tell you in her new department, we're putting an equity lens on everything so that if there's a developer that comes to us and, because we have a number, if two developers come to us, one's a minority, one's not, they will get a preference. But the goal of the affordable housing is not to enhance minority owners. It's to create more affordable housing, which.
But someone has to build that housing. Some company has to build that housing.
Right, but the initial goal is, whether it's a Caucasian owner or a minority owner, if we're creating more affordable housing, that's a good goal in and of
It's a
itself
great
to
goal.
accomplish.
It's a great goal, an even greater goal in those communities
Right,
where
well,
affordable housing.
And they'll get a
Yeah.
preference.
Okay,
Chair Taylor,
yeah, yes.
Chair Taylor, I'm going to help push on that issue because the question that we often get is there not enough minority developers, minority builders? So to the point, we certainly understand that the goal is not to create developers. We get that. But if we truly have an eye of equity on everything, this is a perfect opportunity to think about how do we put some funding into a situation that builds the capacity of minority companies, because often you won't even see them because they're not able to participate because they're not at capacity.
So, can I speak? I don't know if you can hear me.
Let's one moment, Sheila. Let's let Heidi go first. You want?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to say, so what I heard was that, yes, that specific funding that's proposed to go to council from ARPA around affordable housing is specifically focused on affordable housing. But I think what we're saying, and it's what Member Maccabee just said, is that layer an equity lens on that as one of the ARPA funded proposals means that we're looking at minority-owned businesses as the contracting people that we want to be supporting with that. So yes, you're focused on affordable housing, but that racial equity lens is what our group is charged with trying to recommendations about. And so I just wanted to be clear about that. The other thing is, I heard you, Chair, say that there's a pipeline that you were proposing, potentially a pipeline, that there would be apprenticing, or that there could potentially be ways, much like Member Maccabee just said, to build capacity for minority-owned businesses that maybe folks didn't have an opportunity to do. So I heard you kind of mentioning that, and I just wanted to not lose that point.
Yeah, it's a mention, but it's not, quite honestly, out of my league in terms of my understanding. Member Shoemate and others probably can talk to this a lot better than I can, but yeah, certainly.
But it's the idea of it.
It's
that
the
I don't
idea,
wanna
right.
lose track
Ms.
of.
Wright? Thank you.
Actually, I think the point has already been made. So thank you.
And Member McShepard had his hand up, but
Oh.
it went away.
Okay.
Yeah,
any-
I had my hand up. The executive answered my question in his comments, but I did want to ask Ms. Wright if she would, being a developer, a person of color who's walked this path recently and certainly can talk to some of the challenges that she's faced. I mean, I think your input on this would be very helpful. So don't just throw it away so quickly, Ms. Wright. Please share a little bit of perspective.
Well, I would just say that just like other businesses, typically minority owners don't show up in the market heavily capitalized. There's not a lot of patient capital in the market. And when you start doing projects and you're talking about affordable homes, whether it's a LIHTC deal, which is all affordable, it's tough to get on those deals if you haven't done one of those deals before. You talk about 9% or 4% deal, the low income tax credits. If you're just talking about the lower end of 80% of AMI affordable units, or maybe home funds restricted units, those kind of projects typically, usually you see CDCs take on those projects, or larger developers, because it's so cash you need so much cash up front. And we're working on an affordable housing project in our project in Huff. We're using a 221D4 loan, which is a market rate product for HUD. It allows us to get in the game without having to have a guarantor. We don't have to personally guarantor $9.2 million, but it requires an injection of equity. That means that, and since we aren't showing up to the market with the kind of funds that majority developers have, our developer fee, we are deferring that fee to inject that back into the deal. There's no room in our project for debt or equity, no room. We have put it to the max. And so I would just say, as we have these conversations, think about however create, and when you start dealing with federal dollars, there's certain attachments to it, so I understand that. But I would just say overall, not just for minority developers, but minority businesses overall, if we can start thinking about opportunities to create patient capital, if we can start thinking about minority developers who haven't been in the market as emerging developers. I'm getting a lot of conversations from people about the word developer. And when you talk about developer here in Northeast Ohio, we're typically talking about majority developers who have capitalized off of plenty of opportunities. And now that emerging developers are coming about, it's a time where we are asking different questions, and we should be asking these questions, but we should take into consideration under the lens of equity, how were other developers able to get there? And what does this actually mean to the community? I mean, at this point, our project, we've been criticized to say you might as well be a CDC. We are cutting our fees. We are injecting cash into it. And I'm not asking anyone to cry for me. I'm just saying that as we think about the decision making, equity typically comes about at the decision points of the allocation of resources. And so, at some point, it has to matter. The equity piece, the race piece, either matters or it doesn't. It has to matter if we're talking about changing things. And so that's pretty much, what I want.
That's important. And I imagine you would prefer to have a different business model right around this development if you could, right? Plug in your development fees back in, not even on the back end, right? It's part of the financing for this. So you'd rather have a different model. And we want these small businesses, developers in our communities to have a chance to grow, right? And if these funds can help with that, or if there's instruction to majority developers to aid and assist, that's one more pipeline opportunity. I don't want to trample this to death. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just want to speak to the efforts around youth, so the need for respite care, the Youth Diversion Center. So I just want to hold some space for the fact that our community and our children are filling up the detention center on charges of rape and murder. That is a failing of our community and not those children and their families. I just want to hold that space. And I'm curious if there are any investments on the early childhood front, because that's where we are most likely to intervene on needs that prevent children from becoming either victims or perpetrators of high-level violence that we want to see eradicated.
Yeah, that one touched my soul, right? When we hear worse than ever, and we were to be true there, worse than ever is sort of a damning commentary on us all. And then when you add murders and rapists to the equation, in this context, not what we heard nationally, but in this context, even worse. So holding that space.
And their identity is children.
Their identity is as children.
They have been charged with heinous crimes. And so I do wonder about the early childhood investment, if there is some space for that. And then hopefully there is some coordination of effort in alignment with the Ohio Rise Medicaid program that will kick off on July 1. There are 3 care management entities now serving Cuyahoga County, so hopefully we can have an opportunity to learn more about the intentions of that program. It's designed for multi-system involved youth, so those youth who are encountering the law enforcement or justice system as well as other systems like protective services, developmental disabilities, hospital systems, and so on.
So just to respond very briefly, I've been a huge advocate for pre-K, high-quality pre-K education. And that has to be sustainable because it's annual, it's not a one-time. The ARPA money is one time, so we're trying to use the ARPA money for things that we can make a difference with one-time money. On the pre-K, when I came into office, we created space and doubled the number of children that are in our high-quality pre-K program from 2,000 to 4,000, I think. There's still more to do, but we did that. We're trying not to, when we are allocating ARPA funds, we're also trying to keep in consideration other sources of funding. So there's been substantial discussion about pre-K money, more pre-K money coming out of more federal programs, the Build Back Better, et cetera. So again, before we try to put more money in pre-K, we want to see what the federal government will do for us. So we're not spending money that would otherwise go to other things.
Okay, so
But you're right, you got to start dealing with the issues at the very beginning.
Denise, if you got your hand raised. And the nails are painted, I see on your hand. Yeah.
Thank you. I just, I wanted to make two comments. One of them is around, our discussions around using an equity lens around the allocations for ARPA funding. I feel a little disappointed that we're not looking at these projects and specifically how they're matching around what the equity goals are going to be and how we're actually going to measure that. Sheila, you said it very well when you said at the point of the decision making is really where we control how this is going to happen and how it's going to function. And so maybe it's been developed, it just hasn't been shared, but I feel like we're an equity committee. And so I think it's just a little challenging for me. Like it all sounds like great stuff, but it also sounds like there's a lot of stuff that other resources are going to. And so just really understanding the spin on how we are going to make sure that this is an equitable investment. I'm struggling to understand that. And so I don't know if just this format doesn't provide enough time for that level of detail, but I guess I'm going to press a little bit that it would be important for us to really have a clear understanding as we're in the community, we're being asked, what are those? And we could articulate the categories just like they were articulated, but can't really give a whole lot more substantive around what is the equity impact to these investments. And so I know there's still a little bit of time, but I think that is just really important that we kind of say, hey, this is the equitable impact. So that is my first comment and kind of a request, right, on how do we really start connecting the dots between the investment and what exactly it's targeting in a very strategic policy specific way to ensure that we're maximizing the investment. I think my second piece obviously is more granular and specific to the Small Business Lending Fund. And so obviously we have a lot of partners that are putting a lot of money in small business lending, which I think is excellent and the best it's ever been. But obviously for issues of inequity, how is the county's fund different than a lot of the other programs that are out there? And again, how is it filling the gap between everybody else, and how was it developed specifically to make sure that we're meeting a crucial need in the market? And so that's all I got.
Let me, first of all, thanks for your question. And these programs by definition, I couldn't go into all the details, and in some cases, they're not even all developed yet. But for example, the college scholarships, that's all low income oriented. That's one of the requirements. You have to be under, I think it's $35,000 family income. So, that's built into the program. The rental assistance it's almost entirely a low income program. The Hitchcock Center for Women, if you look at who their clientele is. It's almost all a minority women. If you look at the who we're dealing with in the David's here, he can tell you about who needs the emergency placements. It's primarily minorities that utilize our program. I mean, you go through program by program. These are almost all impacting equity. So I'm not sure how to answer the question otherwise. I mean, that's what we do as a county government in most cases.
Yeah, and I apologize if I wasn't more specific. I guess it just makes sense to say, hey, through this $1 million investment, we're going to impact 300 women that are going to be housed in the Hitchcock Center for opiate abuse and family reunification or whatever that is. I think it just needs to be very clear, and not just obviously for the purpose of this committee.
We have those goals.
And that's what I meant. I know your presentation is very limited in this platform, so I get that. But I think as an advisory on equity, I think it's important that we are very clear because we are also kind of your boots in the ground in the community, right? And so as these, proposals or decisions go to council, I think it's important that we understand it so then we could advocate and support appropriately. And so I don't feel like I have that level of information and would like to be able to be a better leader in that sense.
And what will happen is the experts will come in. I'm not the expert in all these programs by any means. So the experts will come in and present to council. And that's where council will ask the questions that you're asking. And the experts will be able to give them all the answers to the questions, as well as the goals and numbers and everything else. Those are all very appropriate questions.
So one more question perhaps from Glenn.
Thank you, Chair Taylor. And I guess comment and a question. On the comment side, I mean, I agree with a lot of things discussed and shared about how CACE can function, in particular more as a partner with the county. And as a lot of cases, there's in development projects anyway, there's kind of this whole concept of community benefit. And there's really nobody there representing the community, right? So developer or builder or owner comes in and says they want to do X and we're going to provide community benefits. But I guess I'm looking for the standard, not that, and really as this council, which makes up some level of expertise and community connection, can better understand, as I think Member Contreras was sharing, and support maybe at least the county's position on this as we get asked in the community about what's going on with a given topic or given project. I mean, it's interesting that we kind of have a similar knowledge base of whatever comes up in Cleveland.com or news release, but we never necessarily hear it or discuss it at this group. And I think we have at least 3 committees that have focuses, right? Quality of life, economic development, health. But I guess were those projects that the county is going to consider funding or looking at, it'd be great if this body could be part of that process, be part of that direction in kind of decision or direction. Is a statement which I think is in line with what kind of others were saying. And I mean, in the development case, you hear on one hand landowners saying it's not our project, we just have the land, and then we hear the county saying it's not our project, we have the money. Well, you two are the biggest influencers of whether the project is going to go forward, right? And unless there's a sense of instilling what the county's value systems are, in many cases, a developer, private owner, or institution won't necessarily have that level of knowledge or expertise or understand what the county's looking for. Case in point would be the County Convention Center, Medical Mart, Hilton Hotel. You can't put into a contract all the things you want, but you can express your interest and then see that they're fulfilled within a contract. And that's exactly what happened. And I think, to me, that's really what it would just be good to flesh out and share in some sort of degree of a template. So that's my comment. The real question I had was, I know we've asked and you described that you have 500 or 700 responses for how to use funding. And I've asked before about, are there key areas that those came in, or key areas of focus. I think we all understand the county's primary service is health and human services and in that aspect, and that's a large part of what you do. But I guess where there's an opportunity for beyond health and human services, what are the key things that are really going to drive equity? And characterizing equity as health and human services is only the first step of it, right? I think we have to get beyond health and human services to really talk about where equity really plays into place, especially in the business side of things or the operational side of things. And, county exec, I also had shared much before about the participatory budgeting, which I think would be how do we understand where those opportunities are, where the focuses are, even where there's the county soliciting or sees a need for. I mean, you talk about the MBE business part, and that's those groups and organizations are getting funding there is great, but are there other organizations who would have liked to have known that here's an opportunity that the county's looking for, you would provide a service? And I think that's where the gap for me is that it's not always clear of where we want to. I mean, you could get 1,000 different responses, but you're only going to fund it in certain areas, and in a more strategic sense of where you're funding or what you're looking to fund would just be helpful for the overall. And maybe you don't have to comment, but maybe it's just my comment versus a response needed.
Thank you, Member Shoemate. So we're going to move on. I would sum it to say thank you, first of all, for outlining these nearly, by my count, a dozen or so projects that have this equity lens to it. We're going to always squabble over words and application, but it is important that these things exist. We also recognize you won't be the county in the fulfillment business for all these things. You're a supplier of funds, right? And then you've got to trust partners to deliver. We would certainly like to, wherever possible, be in those conversations at some point so that those partners also understand that it's important, not just from what you've written, but because we exist as a body, important to hear perhaps from us. The final thing, so thank you, is really the large part of it. But the final thing I'd say, I'm not going to put on record an amount, but I do think as we're going through this ARPA funding process, there should be some funds, again, I'm not going to articulate the amount, some funds appropriated to this entity, right? Because there are lots of great ideas, and I think if bringing some consultants around, helping in preparation of materials, whatever it might be, this body can then probably have greater impact on the thinking going into so many of these important decisions that are going to happen over the next several months and years. So again, it's a call we've made before. I don't know that we've talked in detail about it, but I think it's something that we should more seriously consider. A bit cryptic, but I think you understand the point that I'm making. Anything else? All right.
Chairman Taylor, to the last point that you made, and to many of the excellent points shared by our fellow committee members, perhaps we could put together a rough draft of what might be some criteria that we think should be a part of the decision-making process, factoring in that equity lens perspective. Not that it would be perfect, but I think it would be helpful in providing the county executive and other decision makers a little more of our perspective of where we're coming from and what we think might help move the process along.
It's a great idea, and it will certainly help in Ms. Ross's role as the person who's in some ways intermediary, right, between the two bodies. So that's a great idea that we, instead of talking about it, which I've also accused us of doing, and then these words today from the county executive, we can actually put something into action. So I think it's great. At least put it on paper. So a wonderful idea. Thank you for taking on that responsibility, Member McShepard. All right. All right. Let's quickly, we need to approve some minutes because there's no additional message from the chair.
Okay. The minutes from the March 14th, 2022 CACE meeting were distributed on March 28th, 2022 for your review. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes as distributed? Do I have a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing or hearing none, those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries and the minutes are accepted.
Member terms.
So during a prior meeting, Chair Taylor requested that I update this group on your terms as members. And as a reminder, pursuant to the enabling legislation, CACE member terms are staggered. There are 5-year terms, 3 years, and 1-year terms. The following members' terms will expire on July 14th of this year. Marinette Blackwell, Reverend Kenneth Chalker, Habiba Grimes, Victor Ruiz, and Glenn Shoemate. The following member terms will expire on July 14th of next year. Janice Contreras, Dr. Gullett, India Pierce-Lee, Randy McShepard, and Eddie Taylor. And lastly, the terms that are expiring on July 14th of 2024 are Stephen Cavanis, Marsha Maccabee, and Sheila Wright. Currently, to remind you, there are 2 vacancies on the CASE board. Once those 2 individuals are appointed, their terms will expire on July 14th of 2024 as well. The county executive, I know, is currently considering some names that were recommended by this group as well as others, and I believe a decision will be forthcoming soon on those. The following members' terms will expire on July 14th of 2025, and those 2 folks are Yanela Sims and Levine Ross. That is what I have to report.
And for those who have terms expiring in the calendar year 2022, this is not an invitation to run and hide. It isn't. There's just a process that has to be undertaken, so.
It's an invitation to renew.
It's right, it was the opposite of
County
running and
executive,
hiding.
it's an invitation to renew.
Correct.
So just for clarification, you said there are 2 open seats?
There are.
Yes.
Okay, and then there's 3-year, 5-year, and 1-year terms?
Correct.
Was that, okay.
Yes,
I just wanted to make sure I had the numbers right.
Yes,
Thank you.
and your term you are set to expire in the year 2025, you know.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you for that. We will reduce it to writing so people can actually see it. Okay.
I bet the powers that are listening, you'll probably have an email soon about that.
Okay, very good. All right. Mr. Merriman.
Next on the agenda, moving quickly, Chief Marshall is here. Chief Marshall, can you share a brief update regarding both the Department of Human Resources as well as the tuition reimbursement program and anything else that you think may be relevant to share with this group, please?
Well, absolutely, but I'll keep it brief. The tuition reimbursement program is well underway. We met with the PRC because it goes in the employee handbook. We bring it to them first just to get their input, and we've got some favorable feedback from them on that. So it's going to council on April 12th, and we're hoping to move it through council fairly quickly and have it ready to implement in early May.
Great.
The study on interview and the panels that make up our interviews are on hold just because of some illness in the department. And I'll leave that at that. And other than that, we're still continuing to do our hirings for those positions that are widely needed, correction officers, social workers, things like that. We've gotten very creative in hoping that we can get interest in those positions by doing virtual fairs where employees don't have to show up in person, but they can learn about these jobs virtually, and then following up with some in-person job fairs. At the very last one that we had for, I'm going to say this wrong, David, family support specialist?
Social Service Worker 3.
Thank you. I said I was gonna say it wrong. Social
You were
Service
close.
Worker 3. Yeah. I think we had 48 applicants show up, and we were able to make conditional offers to over 28 of them. And then we had 3 for positions that weren't even mentioned, but in the conversations with the recruiting team and the employees on staff, we were able to secure 3 more provisional offers. So we're looking way outside the box to get as much as we can out of the, get as much advertisement and publicity in as many ways as that we can.
That's great. Thank you. Any questions?
Oh, one last update on the Central Surge neighborhood. We're working on, it's an area between, and I'm not sure where it starts, but it goes up to East 55th and then over to Quincy. In that, we're doing some workforce development. We're working with a few agencies to not only get people learning about county jobs, but interested in applying for county jobs. So it's called the Central Surge. I don't have a whole big definition of it, but it's one that I'm excited about because first, it's a neighborhood that I grew up in, and I don't ever remember as a child thinking about I could apply for a county job. It was like a county job, wow! And now we're trying to make sure that people in neighborhoods where maybe this isn't thought of, not only are thinking of it but are prepared for it. So we're working with several agencies, and I can be more specific about that probably at our next meeting.
Central Surge, I wouldn't have connected those two things, but yeah, absolutely. Okay, good, thank you.
And just another question on that,
Yes.
those postings and available positions are also on the county website?
They are, and they're also going into websites where people are applying outside of the neighborhood. So they come to career events, and those postings are being distributed to those individuals running those events. And actually, it's also a part of a summer youth program where a summer youth that might need a job for Cuyahoga County, their parents are also, if they mention, hey, I'm looking for a job too, we can provide some information to parents as well.
And then there's an array of like specific qualifications for these jobs. Like I know some of like I would assume like a social work position would require a social work license. But are there other positions that folks can do with like a high school education or GED?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And those are the ones that get the least publicity. So those are the ones where we're working with community agencies to get them out to say you don't have to go to school 2 years, 4 years, whatever. You can have experience and be well qualified for a job without a degree. So we're looking at that as well.
Thank you.
I did have a question, if I may, Chair Taylor.
Yes, sir.
The tuition reimbursement, is it up to the employee to decide whatever area of study they want to pursue, or are there certain areas that you're willing to support?
So I've left that, and I can send you a copy of what went to the PRC and what's going to council. I left that very broad to say it has to relate to a job that you are currently in or a future job you might be looking at. So while you can't take basket weaving 101, but if you're a sanitary worker and someday you'd like to be an accountant, we would not preclude someone who's working in sanitation right now from taking a course in accounting. Because that could absolutely be a future job at the county.
And then are there requirements after after that coursework is completed for folks to stay for X period of time to?
There is.
Okay.
So 1 year, if you leave within 1 year, you have to reimburse the county for what was paid over the past year, 100%. If you leave after 2 years, you have to pay for what was paid by the county in that last year, 50%. And if you leave within 3 years, then you have to pay back what was paid over that last year at 175 and then 50%. So 1, 2, and 3.
So if I may, Chair Taylor.
Please, Randy.
I'm sorry. My follow-up point, I guess, I wanted to make was simply that, and this may or may not be in the purview of our guest presenting on this, but I recall when we were doing interviews as a young, CACE group, talking to all of the departments at the county, I certainly was struck by the fact that when you got to the heads of most of those departments, they were not people of color. And I wonder, putting on my chief talent officer hat of a publicly traded corporation, I know how deliberate we have to be in terms of identifying people, that putting them on an upward trajectory track and investing in them. So I was curious to know if, as we think about tuition reimbursement, are we thinking about ways of identifying talented minorities and ensuring that they're getting opportunities to be trained or developed, or even not only go to colleges and universities, but other types of organizations, institutions that can help them prepare for heads of some of the departments that are part of the county government?
So my short answer is not yet.
Okay, fair enough.
So you probably should spend some time with the Chief Talent Officer of publicly traded company.
Right, right. I mean, I have some ideas how that could work. I mean, I've been in a leadership program for that very reason. So I know what they look like and I know how they work. Are we doing it yet here? No,
Okay.
not yet.
I was gonna suggest perhaps, Sheba, you can send me the document that you referenced.
Yes.
That you sent to the PRC and I could distribute it to this body.
I could do that,
Thank
absolutely.
you.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's it for both in human resources.
Okay, we're gonna just, Lenora, if you could very quickly just provide us with an update regarding the, your department as well as the diversity training and the equity commission, and then we will get to our featured guests.
Okay, thank you. I'll also be pretty brief, try to hit the high points. So for the Department of Equity and Inclusion, a couple of the major items that we're working on is that we're proceeding with the hiring process for our 2 vacancies. The 3 projects, one I'll give a brief overview coming up is the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Training. Another project that we're working on imminently is pretty soon is the GARES Racial Equity and it's an Employee Racial Equity Survey. The data agreement was approved this week by both the county and Race4, which is the proper name for the entity with the GARES survey. So I'll be scheduling a meeting with their primary contact with Race4 so we can start looking at the timeline with the survey. We would like for that timeline to serve as our baseline so we can see where we are, where's the perception by our employees, or where we are with racial equity. As a membership of GARE, they will do the survey. As part of the membership, you can have that as one of the benefits. And our goal is to repeat that survey in 2 to 3 years to see if there's a change in the response on the surveys based on our equity and inclusion efforts over that time period. The other item that we're working on is the second update of the purchasing and contracting forecast. This will be our anniversary. July 1st was the first time we did a forecast last year. We did an update that was published in January, and this would be the second update. And the survey, the forecast provides our 24-month planning summary of what we plan to purchase and contracts for within the next 24-month period. And it's one of the best practices for a race and gender neutral initiative to increase participation by small businesses, minority business, and women businesses, because if they're not part of the county's process, at least they get a more advanced warning of what we're planning to purchase more than just the 30 days, which is now our current requirement when we actually advertise. For the racial equity and inclusion contract training that we're working with Tri-C, we're completing the stakeholder analysis that included the 5 focus groups and the 3 interviews with top executives. Report will be presented to the county executive on Friday, and that report will include a summary of findings and recommendations on how to tailor the training that they're going to provide to the county so that it addresses any particular in the county's environment and how to maximize the impact of that training. As part of that training, the first rollout will be for managers. The managers should be trained starting late May and should be completed by July, and that will be followed with the general staff training, which will occur afterwards all the way through to November.
So will the Race Forward survey be
That's the goal, for it to be right
done
before.
before all of these things, right?
Well, the goal is to try to get the survey in before we do the general staff.
Okay, great.
So that's the
Great.
goal. We're trying to proceed with the survey, hopefully between May and
Yeah,
June.
the timing matters.
So that get the baseline, yes.
And I also wonder, while the consultant you're using for Race Forward, through GARE, right, there's somebody who created the survey, or does GARE have the survey themselves?
Right, so GARE is I guess you would say the public name, Race Forward is the entity.
Underneath or inside of GARE?
Correct.
The real question is, not that we want to put it out in public space, but I think it'd be interesting to see some of the questions asked through this survey of the employees.
I can
don't wanna
share
share
a
it.
template. They have a draft of the questions, because this is standard survey. It hasn't been modified probably within the last year. That was one of when we updated it with.
I mean, this is a climate survey. It's a climate.
Right, correct.
So it'd be interesting to hear, to read in some ways what they're trying to assess from a climate standpoint. Okay.
Finally, the Equity Commission, our last meeting was March 17th. We met, the main item on the agenda was the presentation by Madeline Rife with the College Now mentoring program. The goal is because the demographic of the students that they work with have a diversity, and they were pushing for diverse mentors to participate. So there was a presentation to our group, and also they have been having presentations or flyers, emails, and information throughout the county to try to increase that participation.
That's great. I'm pretty familiar with College Now, as others are, and I've been a mentor in the program. There is no greater impact you can have on these young adults, these college-going folks, than to have a mentor. It's a requirement in the program, but they need mentors who are folks of color, but they need mentors of all stripes as well. So the more you can do to impress upon folks to engage would be great, because it does make a difference.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Any questions?
So
All right.
I'll send it to you.
Okay, I want to first again, David, thank you for your patience during this process. And today, I'm excited to welcome Cuyahoga County Department of Health and Human Services Director David Merriman. He's going to provide us an update on equity efforts in his department. Prior to his current role, Mr. Merriman has gained a wealth of knowledge serving as an administrator for Job and Family Services and in a variety of other roles, including having served as a special assistant to the very first county executive at Fitzgerald, which is where I had the pleasure of meeting David. Before joining the county, he worked for the Cleveland Department of Health. David, I thank you again for joining us, and I just asked if you can to, we talked a little bit about the central surge, and I know you were instrumental and actually attended the surge, so if you could give just a 2-minute overview for the folks so they know exactly what that central surge was that you all went out for.
Great. First, thank you very much for inviting me to be here today. Again, my name is David Merriman. I'm the Director of Health and Human Services. A little bit on myself. I began my career at the county back in the late 90s as a child welfare worker. I've worked in public health, working in the city of Cleveland, and returned to the county in 2010, and really am proud to be serving in this role. So as Clerk Bird recognized, the Central Surge Project was an effort by the Buttigieg administration, led by Chief of Staff Bill Mason, to engage the Central community. And I think what makes it exciting and different is there were several development projects under consideration for Central. And as the county approached community leadership, one of the things we heard is that there needs to be more community input and really discussion about community benefits of county investment. And it being less about when we have a specific ask in mind and more about what broad asks exist within the community and how the county can sustain and invest deeper into a specific community. Clearly, our historical approach has been to try to spread resources around as best as possible, to give everybody some investment, but probably not to go deep into any specific community. A good example of that is the Summer Youth Employment Program, where we try to ensure that youth from every community get involved and are given an opportunity to get a summer job, but all too frequently, no single community gets a real significant allocation of those opportunities. And so inevitably what happens is you help out a few youth here, a few youth there, but no single community really changes as a result. So I think what the Central Surge proposed is if we were to consolidate and focus our resources on a community, and in that case Central became the first, we could probably have a greater impact. We could definitely present those resources, get feedback on how they're being used and if in fact they're valuable. So in the first year, much of what we looked at were, again, the use of those summer youth employment opportunities, looking at investment of dollars through the Department of Development, considering our contracts, and are we investing in organizations within the community, or if we're missing organizations, do we have to reopen those procurements, the RFPs and the RFPs, and to do outreach to the organizations and say, we saw that you missed this, we'll give you another shot at applying. And I think that first year was a good year. We learned a lot. We did implement it largely during the time of one of the COVID surges, and we had some hits and misses. There were times that we had, I think, good reaction to our services. We had events in Central where we brought the community together, open public forums to listen and hear from them. what they thought of our ideas and to give us direct feedback. I think we also saw that some of our resources, such as summer youth, were not really deemed valuable, and there wasn't a big take-up. And it really forced us to go back and reconsider what exactly it means to bring a service to a community, and is it really presented in a way and open in a way that the community will find it valuable. So I think the central search goes on, and it's something we want to continue to really consider, and I assume we'll continue it all the way through this year, because I think it is going to force us to reconsider whether that approach of spreading resources makes the most sense, or targeting it when we want to have a deeper impact. So that's just a little bit on central search. I'd be happy to talk more about it. I have some other updates I'd also like to give, and in the interest of the agenda.
That follow-up would be great, because intuitively, a more focused approach where you can measure the results in a concentrated area seems to make most sense, rather than, as we've said over time, the peanut butter effect. So you will decide what makes most sense, but sort of concentrating this allows a deeper dive into all the things that you can count. But go ahead.
So I'd be grateful to come back and either present or get a presentation from one of the other leads on central search. I do want to share just a few other updates. What we're doing in the Department of Health and Human Services, as well as some big changes that are going on. And then I know there's a very brief presentation I was going to try to make. So just let me say this about what we have been doing to improve and increase our response to race, equity, and inclusion. Much of the focus has been on normalizing the conversation. Dr. Leon Harris and Sabrina Roberts have led a steering committee that has had ongoing agency-wide projects, either lunch and learn sessions, discussions, reports that have really responded to staff input and questions about what concerns, what questions, what ideas do they have that they think we should be talking about to really change DHHS's view on race, equity, and inclusion. I think that work went well the first year. We considered it a pilot year as we tried these efforts, and I think we did a good job of establishing a more normal response and conversation. I think we have to move to the next step, which is more action, and that's kind of the hope for this year. Let's just acknowledge this is also a transition year, and there are a lot of changes going on, but it's still a valuable year. And I think one of the things that we would like to do is bring forward specific ideas that move beyond normalizing a conversation and move to action about our effort and the work that we're doing, and how we think we can begin to see a direct impact on the clients and the communities we serve. So I'll be sharing a little bit more on one of those actions in a few minutes. I think the other thing that we just have to acknowledge is we're seeing some major transitions. Dr. Leon Harris announced his resignation. He's going to be going to the centers, formerly known as the Centers for Families and Children. And if I understand correctly, he'll be their chief of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're also losing Tracy Mason and Paul Porter. So we lost 3 key staff members over the course of the past month. And it's difficult. It's difficult to lose leadership. At the same time, that also presents opportunities for staff to promote and to move into positions. And what I can share with you, and for folks that are watching, is sort of a leg up maybe. In every question, in every interview, we always ask the question, what is the work you're doing right now that advances equity and inclusion within your organization? It's not aspirational. What would you like to do? Or it's not a retrospective. What have you done? It's right now. What are you doing right now, and how did you prepare for that work? I think that's become just a real key consideration in all of our hiring. And I will say that as we see at-will positions open up, and for those that don't know, an at-will position is when the county executive appoints someone to a position. They don't have the same civil service classification, the same civil service protections, and so the next administration can come in and make a staff change. Because of that, and because where we are in this year, we're not going to be permanently hiring a lot of these leaders and replacing them. What I think our plan is to do is to find staff that will serve in those roles for a temporary basis through the rest of the year. And those staff are being asked to interview for these positions. Every one of the positions we're hiring, we're gathering candidates internally. We're interviewing 3 to 5 candidates every time, asking the same sorts of questions we naturally want to ask for a person that would get the position permanently. And so this, there are a lot of changes. There's a lot of good work going on still. At the same time, our goal is to move from, what has been a lot of just discussion and really important sort of level setting around race, equity, and inclusion to direct action. And if I may, I'd like to move now to the procurement. I think, do we have it up to be shared?
I don't, yes.
Do we have a few minutes to move through it quickly?
Please, yep.
So what I'd like to do is I'd just like to share this as one example on how the county Department of Health and Human Services is trying to present real direct action and looking for input on our approach to race, equity, and inclusion. So what you see before you is a presentation on this RFP. We've recently released last Friday an RFP to identify a provider to help us develop services that will serve Ohio National Guardsmen and women. You can advance. One more slide, please. So what I'd like to just say about this approach, this is going to sound a lot like a workforce program. And our goal is to help individuals that have served in the National Guard that are eligible for scholarship dollars to achieve the outcomes that are listed. And what makes sense about this is that this is a very difficult workforce environment right now. There are a lot of job openings, and there are scholarship dollars available. And the county has always had a significant role in helping residents get into college, get through college, and get a job. I know Randall McShepard has served as the past chair of the Workforce Development Board. There's been others on this advisory council that have been on the Workforce Development Board. I know that board member Sheila Wright has been on the board as well. And so this may look familiar. And what's exciting about it is that we are partnering with the Ohio Department of Education to achieve the outcomes that are listed there. And again, somewhat similar to much of what goes on in workforce, getting people through college and into jobs. But what's exciting for me is, if you'll see in the top, it talks about also addressing and eliminating disparities. And this will be one of the first times that I'm aware of that we're looking to identify specific outcomes for improved performance of the Ohio National Guard scholarship programs, performance for students of color. And our belief is that if we design programs from the onset to address disparities, we will have a better result. And if I can ask you to move forward, I'll be able to explain how that's going to occur. First, let me tell you a little bit about the program. So our goal is to find an external provider that will help us implement the project in front of you. And what it really is it anticipates a long 2 to 3, 4 year period where individuals have been supported and we're tracking performance. Specifically, the RFP that's on the street right now is looking to bring in a coaching provider, and that's in yellow up on the screen. And that coaching provider will be selected to help us create the actual model that we hope to implement that will engage Ohio National Guards members, that will help them explore career opportunities, help them get into college or a training program, through college and training program, get them a job, and hopefully a job in a good paying career. And we believe if we can design this service with the experts at the table, we will outperform the existing program. If I can ask you to advance the slide. And our hope is that we'll serve over a 3 year period around 300 residents. We're a little bit open on this point. Our intent is to serve Cuyahoga County residents, and our hope is that they'll go to an education institution in Cuyahoga County. But at this time, we're still deciding whether or not we would be open to someone from outside the county coming into the county and using one of our institutions. Would they be able to benefit from these services? And I think we believe if it would help a major educational institution and a guardsman get a job and get placed in one of our sector partnerships, it'd be worth considering. Similarly, if one of our county residents wants to go to a college outside of Cuyahoga County, we may allow this service to follow them. So there's still some elements of this that are being worked out. Can I ask you to move forward? So very briefly, this, as I said, this is a multi-year project. And what I'm showing up there is the project outcomes. Is we anticipate making success payments to an entity at various stages. Unlike the traditional model of government where we pay for the service up front or we allow for the entity to bill us monthly, our goal is to draw some investment dollars and to be making payments on outcomes as they achieve. And I can show that on the next slide on how I believe that's going to happen. So our position is to use a financing strategy called Pay for Success. A quick advertisement, Cuyahoga County was the first county in the United States of America to utilize this Pay for Success financing model. And we implemented the first homeless and child welfare focused Pay for Success model. I know I've presented to this body in the past on that effort, so I won't say much more here. But what the model proposes to, if you look on the left, you get an upfront funder. And what they do is they will provide, in essence, the operating capital to a coaching service provider that's in that light blue box in the middle, who will then serve the Ohio National Guard scholarship recipients. And if that service is successful, an independent evaluator will be able to validate it. Will show that the proposed change to occur. They will report that up to us, will be in the green box, the Social Impact Finance Fund. And if we see the outcomes have been achieved, we'll actually pay that upfront funder back. This is flipping the traditional model of government finance on its head, in that the county pays at the end when the outcome is achieved, as opposed to at the beginning. If I can ask you to advance, and I will ask questions in a second. And so this is the basic structure of the model, what we think of as the service costs and the evaluation costs, and there are some management costs as well. And so that the blue box will largely be funded by outside money, and if the project succeeds, the county will step in and pay in the green box. If we can advance one more. So the partners right now in this are the Department of Health and Human Services is working closely with the Ohio National Guard and the Adjutant General's Office. And I got to acknowledge the Ohio Department of Higher Education and the Adjutant General's Office. They have really recognized the opportunity to improve this service for all residents of Ohio. They weren't able to get funding, so we offered to pilot their proposed intervention here in Cuyahoga County, hopefully proof the concept and be able to demonstrate its impact to the state, and then it could go statewide. We are working with an organization called Third Sector Capital Partners, and what they do is they help bring in some of these outside funds and also do the project development. Can we advance one more slide, please? One more. Actually, just go, so this is fine. So what I'll say, this largely is an overview of how we move from a traditional approach to a Pay for Success approach, really paying for much more of the outcomes and the design, as opposed to paying for the basically upfront financing and then really not having much incentive for the provider to succeed or over-succeed. If we can move one more slide forward. I do want to, this is an example of a rate card. These are not the figures that we expect to pay on, but it's an example of how we think we can pay per every single outcome. So as an example, for somebody that gets a post-secondary degree or credential, we can pay $100 for that individual's outcome, and that money will pay back the outside investment. Similarly, you then do an increase if you're going to get someone through a 4-year degree program. So I'm bringing you this to show this is how we think we need to design programs, but I clearly have another intent. If we can move forward one more. Actually, let's do one more beyond that, please. Okay, so part of the reason that we're looking at this is one of the things we saw in the state's design that really compelled us is that the state program is unfortunately not really achieving the full performance that it could. And I think what we know is that there are a lot of Ohioans that make the decision to serve in the Ohio National Guard. They get eligible for these dollars, these scholarship dollars, and many of them start school, but unfortunately many of them do not finish. Many drop out for really many reasons. And you can see from here that the entrance rates are fairly high. The completion rates you'll see are not. If we can move forward one slide. So I think a lot of what is exciting to us about this deal is that we think this is an opportunity to really start to prove that if we design services at the onset to achieve a better outcome, and we include in that design a focus on how to address racial disparities, we can in fact incentivize an effort to address racial disparities. And this is not to say this is a new idea. This is something that was designed into the project from the beginning. But we believe that there is an opportunity here that we bring into the community. We're asking for community input. And in fact, I'm asking CACE, if the CACE would like to be part of us as we talk about part of the group, to really look at how Black and people of color are matriculating through this program and what the success would look like for them, and in fact, what our payment should look like for those individuals. We've never done this before. We believe it's a viable approach, and I think our ask is if the CACE finds this compelling, if there should be some discussion or some follow-up, we'd love to see if someone from the CACE would like to be a part of the governance team that's designing this project, that would ultimately cost out the outcomes and help us determine what approach we should take to making payment. I've really run through this. I know that. I've really sped through this presentation. I know we're a little behind. I'm trying to catch my part of the presentation up, but I feel like this is one of the most exciting projects that we have on deck. I heard in the discussion that, DHHS tends to focus on the problems. That's paraphrasing on my part. I think increasingly we have to focus on the solutions. And I think what you see here is there is a problem. And I think the problem exists for Ohioans throughout our state in utilizing scholarship dollars. And I think there is a disparity here that merits a response. I think our community can develop a response that achieves better outcomes. And I would love to hear feedback from you at the appropriate time on your thoughts on how we can design the model that will give us those outcomes.
Very well done. There's a lot of information in there. I don't know if folks had a chance to read it beforehand, but if not, then take another look. As David described, he feels it's a very important project, and it can be a difference maker. I just have a question around the financing model, 1.5 with a return, a little bit of a coupon after a period of time. I think the interest rate is 4%. Are there other payment intervals along the way, or is it just that, okay, and maybe I missed that in here?
So when we did the first project, we paid it out entirely at the end. The project outcome wasn't achieved and we made no payment. So that was a lesson learned. We would not do that here. I think we would structure this in a way that we would make payments throughout, and we would make payments for just a staging of outcomes that really lead us to the final outcome. And we think it would be better for us to have really have a longer period and a little more fluidity to how we make payments instead of waiting, cashing out at the end.
Fluidity means giving yourself options, right?
That's right.
So some flexibility. And is the thinking annually? Is it semi-annual, or does it depend on your?
We're still exploring that, and I think that's part of what we should talk about. Is what does success look like? Yeah. Do you have to achieve everything at the end, or do we want to acknowledge success or failures?
And how do you invite participants, right?
That's right.
They want to. Okay. All right. Any other questions of David on this subject? Because at some point, one of you may volunteer to participate if you're interested. And how about from our Quality of Life Subcommittee? Anything interesting? I mean, it's all interesting, but anything to add? All right, David.
Nothing to add. No.
I mean, I find this intriguing. I'm trying to still get my head around the model and cohort and how many will be served and outcomes. But let's just talk more about this, because I hope I'll be able to share in the complete excitement you have around the difference it can make. Okay.
Well, we would love that. I would love to hear questions either directly, or if you want to schedule a meeting, Chair Taylor, I'm happy to join you for a meeting, whatever makes sense.
And I also wonder, we've got Say Yes, we got this, we got so many, and not that they're the same, right? These are representing different constituencies because of the National Guard component, but there's probably something to be gleaned or learned from so many other efforts around this, not only matriculation question, but persistence question as well, so that we can get on the other end of not only creating a college-going culture, but seeing what it does and how it benefits our community long-term.
I think the other point that I agree with that. The other point that I would make that we explore in this is, can we begin drawing in national investment? The investor that's looking at this is an organization that reinvests basically impact in dollars. And my belief is this is a better role for county dollars when possible. If somebody else really funds something up front and it can show that you can achieve a result, our dollars can be then used to make success payments, and we end up then funding things that only work.
Oh, I see. Okay, very good.
Thank you so much, David. I really appreciate all that you're doing and have done for a long time in this presentation today. One of the things that I wonder if you could comment on is that sometimes when students get into a program, and particularly students of color, we see this a lot in medical school, and it's been talked about nationally, that we've maybe made some strides on admission and increasing diversity in admission, but we certainly haven't provided adequate support through the process of the education. And I saw here that it says, students without coaching, and I wonder where that discussion is, and it's not just in medical school, it's in post-secondary, it's in all sorts of other, but I was just giving you one example of where the national conversation is around medical education, and I don't know how to fix that, but we can't ignore it, because that is really leading to what we see in the back here on these very inequitable outcomes for graduation at least.
Dr. Glad, I feel that's a great question, and what I think I maybe neglected to say is that, so in the RFP that we've released, we'll not award this deal, will not award the contract. It will invite an entity to come and develop the rest of the project with us. That's the sort of question that we actually need to hear, and we need to ask that entity. It's not enough to get a person in. Somebody has to help get a person through. What's their idea on how to do that? And how would they design the service that would get them all the way through college and into a job, and ideally into a job in an in-demand industry that really needs them to be able to grow? And that's the vision for this. And then if you can do that, what is your idea on how to do that with residents of color? Because their needs may be different. Maybe there are some similar ones, there are some different ones. And the point is that we need an expert to help design this, and part of what we're procuring is the expert to finish baking the model that we then take to an investor and bring in outside funding. And once we have that, we then fund it after it's shown its success.
So that's really helpful. I mean, it seems like an equity lens, and we've talked earlier about different vocabulary, but I think it seems like an equity lens would be essential at this stage to figure out how to even get the right group consultants in to design it. And I know that a lot of shaking heads, I'm sure that that's readily evident to you, but it's a really exciting opportunity, and there's a lot of great case of success projects, but the equity lens I haven't always seen part of that, and so that's why I just want to make sure that we're giving input on that piece.
And that's the input we're searching for. And our hope is to have a series of workshops where we talk about these issues with key stakeholders and really try to decide what's possible, what's feasible, and some of that is what do we start with, we see if it works, and then we do an iterative development and we allow it to continue to grow and improve.
Thank you.
I'm wondering about just the population of Ohio National Guards persons here in Cuyahoga County. There was a time I remember knowing a lot of folks who were National Guards persons, but not anymore. And so I'm just curious if we know what those numbers look like and if there's some higher levels of representation of BIPOC folks in those numbers for Cuyahoga County.
So I think the number that came to us from the Adjutant General is that there are 300 county residents that are serving in the National Guard or served, and that would be eligible for this. I don't have the breakout of the racial breakout or demographic breakout for those. And so even if it's 300, that's a small population. This really does start to feel more like a pilot to the state project with 3,000. But we're going to get that, and that's the point of having both the Ohio Department of Higher Education and the Adjutant General's office working with us on this project, designing this with us, because they have the data. They have all the data that we need, and that their data will in fact determine our success. So it's a great question.
Thank you.
What's currently the composition of the group working on this? You and who else?
So it was me and Leon Harris. We're leading it up.
Three that have departed?
Yes.
All three?
Two of the three that have departed.
Anyone else who hasn't left you?
No.
Okay,
So,
all right.
right now it's me, and we're still trying to staff this. We're trying to find a staff person that can staff it.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Yeah, not a flip question, just trying to understand what. Okay, thank you, David.
Thank you.
Ready.
So,
There won't be any committee reports. If you have something you want to offer to the group, a paragraph to everyone would be great, please.
I will give the Gare via email.
Yeah. I feel bad for Gary. All right, tell us what's going on with the House bills.
Oh, okay.
322, 322, and 327.
So actually not much. With 322 and 327, those are the critical race theory bills, as they're vernacularly called, designed to teach educators from teaching quote-unquote divisive concepts. Laughing at me?
Laughing at that bill.
Oh.
How ridiculous it is.
To date, there's been no additional movement on either of the bills. The next step is for the bills to be voted out of the House, and at that point, they'll then move to the Senate for hearings and voting. If you remember, it starts the process over again when it goes to the second legislative House. So that's really the update on that.
Okay.
And as far as the congressional districts and redistricting, you all probably know as much as going on as I do. The federal judges declined to immediately act on the General Assembly's redistricting. After hours of witness testimony, a 3-judge federal panel decided last week against intervening in the state's process for creating General Assembly maps until Wednesday, April 20th, which is a week from this Wednesday. According to a woman at the Ohio Secretary of State's office, a map is needed by that date to successfully run a primary on Tuesday, August 2nd. The court also heard testimony on which map should be used if the Ohio Redistricting Commission doesn't approve a constitutionally compliant map by that date, and has asked the parties to submit briefs by last Wednesday, April 6th, and reply briefs are due today. So
Today.
Monday, yeah, the reply briefs are due. So I will continue to monitor that. There, as well as I've said previously, there is a website called Ohio Districting Commission website. It's www.redistricting.ohio.gov. And they have been accepting public comment or begun to accept public comment, and they live stream and record all of the commission meetings are available for viewing. So those are the updates on those 2 items.
Any questions? When is our next meeting scheduled? We don't have it.
Oh, no, we always have.
We
always have
Send
it.
me.
It's scheduled, but I don't have it right now. But I know it's scheduled.
We know we have one scheduled. All right, any other questions?
I can look and tell
Not a
you.
question, but a comment. Sure,
A comment, please.
This came out by email, but I just want to make sure folks' eyes are open to the new anti-equity legislation, House Bill 616, and the effort to kind of lump together "Don't Say Gay" and divisive concepts. That one's focused really on pre-K-12, I think, and so, I just want to bring that to folks' attention. Our understanding is that energy may shift to that bill, which has not yet been assigned to a committee, so.
It has not, and as Member Grimes said, it's really designed, it's actually, it's called House Bill 616 and was introduced by folks in Trumbull County and the Cincinnati area. And the bill is aimed at school districts, charter schools, science, tech, engineering, math, or STEM schools, as well as private schools that take Ohio children on vouchers. And in grades K through 3, the bill would prohibit the schools from teaching, using, or providing any curriculum or instruction materials on sexual orientation or gender identity. Then in 4 through 12, those grades, the schools would have to stick with an age and developmentally appropriate I'm sorry.
Go ahead and mute Ms. Shepard.
In grades 4 through 12, the school would have to stick with age and developmentally appropriate instruction, materials, lessons, and curriculum on sexual orientation and gender identity. So it is, I think, I have a copy. I mean, I can distribute it if you guys want.
Latia did send it out to
Did she
everyone by email, but I know how email
Thank
gets,
you, Latia.
so just wanted to bring attention to it.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. The next meeting
is May 9th. Yep, thank you. Any other questions?
Chair Taylor,
Yes.
I know we have.
Monica, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Great. That's 2 months in a row I've done the mask.
I I just wanted to end with a reflection on today's meeting. I think it's probably evident to the folks in attendance of these meetings who sit on the case, but for those who are watching and also for the record, I think it's really important that we reflect on the discussions today, and that a lot of what we've heard earlier was really addressing downstream outcomes of upstream problems. And we clearly have oppressive systems and structures which are leading to the outcomes and overrepresentation of people of color in many of the things we heard that are going to be funded. And these are really important things to fund because people are hurting now, they need help now, and COVID only accentuated all of the problems that we've continued to have. There are racial disparities and racial inequities because of the structural issues. So I just wanted to take a moment to reflect that much of what we heard Member Maccabee and Member Wright and many others say today goes directly back to structural racism as its cause. There are reasons that people of color do not come to developer situations with a large amount of capital. Opportunity was not the same for people of color and people who are white. We know that, but I think it's important that we continue to bring the conversation back to that, because we can say we're layering an equity lens, and that's really important. But ultimately, if we don't focus these conversations, the funding and the work that we do, such as what David was discussing, that creates opportunity, if we don't focus those things to flip the system, it's going to continue to be oppressive. And so I just felt it was really important to bring that back, because I think sometimes we get into the weeds and the details, and those are, but there aren't easy solutions, but we are the body that's got to push those structural issues.
Agreed.
And if we don't do that, we're going to continue to have these same conversations 10 years from now. We can't afford to do that. So I just really appreciate everybody's commitment to this, but I want to make sure that we continue to have those conversations and get where we need to for the equitable outcomes that our community deserves.
Any other comments? Well, thank you all. It's 3:31. We're adjourned.